So, Resident Evil Code Veronica is getting a remake. That's right, Capcom's at it again. We're getting another remake of an older Resident Evil game, and I'm actually very excited about this one. I'm more excited about this one than I have been for an RE remake since 2. And that's a big deal because a lot of people might be wondering why that is, considering that Resident Evil Code Veronica is not my favorite game in the series. In fact, it's my least favorite Resident Evil game from the tank control era. You know, when it comes to the tank control era of Resident Evil, when it comes to that first generation of RE games, you know, before RE4, because Resident Evil 4 is basically like Christ in the Resident Evil franchise. There's before RE4 and there's after RE4. You know what I mean? Um, it is quite literally like the Christ of RE. You know what I mean? It is a dividing point in the franchise. So from that era, from the tank control era, Code Veronica is my least favorite. I actually don't really like that game very much. It was released originally on Dreamcast in '99, and then it was ported to PlayStation 2 a couple of years later after the Dreamcast died. It was ported to PS2 as Resident Evil Code Veronica X. That's the version I actually played. And as far as I know, it's mostly identical to the original, aside from some minor graphical differences, but like it's pretty much the same game. And I did not like it very much. I thought it was kind of boring. I thought it kind of fell flat. I thought the atmosphere was kind of dull. I thought the story, while it had a lot of interesting ideas, lots of interesting ingredients, just was not executed very well at all. I thought some of the characters were extremely grating, especially Steve Burnside. Oh God, he sucks. Fucking Steve. I don't like Steve. His voice acting was awful. His dialogue was awful. He was just a grating character. At best, he was just unintentionally funny sometimes, but mostly he was just grating and annoying. So it has one of the worst characters in the Resident Evil series. And his story is fine. His role is fine. But, like, I guess that's how I feel about a lot of things in Code Veronica. Again, it's like the execution, man. It's just, there's something about it compared to the original trilogy, the first 3 games on PlayStation 1. Those games all just hit a certain way for me. They all felt really well balanced when it came to the exploration and ammo conservation and bosses and all that stuff. And there's something about Code Veronica that just doesn't hit that sweet spot that made the first 3 games, and even a remake that came out later, and Zero. I mean, Zero had its own problems, but even that one I like more than Code Veronica because at least it still had a rich atmosphere. There's something about Code Veronica that just falls flat. And I think it starts with the opening intro. The opening intro to Code Veronica, the original Code Veronica, just feels very at odds with what is supposed to be a creepy survival horror game. And that's because you have Claire Redfield in the opening of Code Veronica acting like John Wick. I mean, she's running away from a gunship that's firing away at her in a building. She's running through a building, trying to outrun a helicopter like Trinity from the Matrix. And it just feels weird. Like she's this one-woman army taking on this entire Umbrella HQ. Now, I know what you're thinking. Resident Evil has had plenty of badass characters doing badass things, but keep in mind that this was Claire Redfield, a civilian biker chick who, this is only months after RE2, and she's outrunning a gunship, and I'm just like, this just feels weird, you know? And she's like, just gunning her way through all these soldiers and all these people at this very high-tech, like top security, Umbrella facility, and it just felt at odds with what the rest of the game was going to be, which is, you know, another slow tank control, item collecting, puzzle solving Resident Evil game. You know, in terms of structure, Code Veronica does what the first 3 games did. It's just, what a weird way to open that game, because as soon as we get past that opening sequence, it tries to go and be a moody horror game, and it's like, you know, she's locked up in this prison on this island, and next thing you know, she's walking through this cemetery, and there's zombies reaching out to her, and all of a sudden she's like a normal Resident Evil character again. She's just all vulnerable and trying to survive. And like, if you go back to the first three games, the way they all opened up, like, if you go back to the very first game with Spencer Mansion, like, keep in mind that that was the STARS unit, this highly trained police, kind of like a SWAT team, that is sent in to investigate this mansion, and they are chased away by a pack of dogs. Mind you, they're mutant dogs, but it's a pack of dogs. You know, and here's Claire Redfield, a civilian who only survived this one incident, and she's like surviving this facility and getting chased by gunships and all these soldiers and like surviving all of this. And I'm like, why would she do this? Why would this one woman just take on this whole facility alone like this? It just, I understand trying to be like do something cool and over the top for the intro of your game, but it feels like an odd way to open up a Resident Evil game, you know? It just, if you look at the intro sequences for the first three games, they don't do anything like that. Even four, which is, you know, it becomes an over-the-top action game as it goes along. Even four knew well enough to start more subtle. You know, you get into that cabin, there's the one Spaniard with the axe, and that's it. Even four knew well enough not to like be overblown right at the start. You know, now obviously that would change with like 5 and 6 a little bit more, but for the most part, like the series is usually pretty good at setting the stage and making it creepy and atmospheric. Now, what I love about Code Veronica Remake, which now is just going to be Resident Evil Veronica, I actually love that change. It's very slick. I like that. Resident Evil Veronica. The intro sequence we see in the trailer that we got at Summer Games Fest is so much more reasonable and feels so much more Resident Evil. She's still in Europe, looking for her brother Chris, but instead of storming an Umbrella HQ, she's at a hotel where Chris was last, reported or whatever. Wherever she's on his trail, and she's at this hotel, and this kind old lady comes up to the door, and she's like, "Oh, you're the brother of the American on the third floor. Hey, how you doing?" And it's like, oh, this is very like atmospheric and quaint. And she's just in this old hotel, and she's going through Chris's things in his room, and he's not there anymore. And it's like, we know what's going on. And then who shows up behind her? Hunk. Hunk shows up out of nowhere with a knife to her neck, and he's like, "Don't move, Claire Redfield." And okay, I assume that's how she gets captured. That's how she gets sent to the island. There's none of this crazy, like, John Woo fucking action movie shit that she was doing at the start of Resident Evil Code Veronica original. Like, it's just so overblown. And in this remake, it's like right away, this feels so much more sensible, you know? This feels so much more like the start of a mysterious horror scenario, you know what I mean? And it feels like, yeah, Claire wouldn't be storming an Umbrella HQ by herself because that would be dumb, you know? That's something Chris might do because he's this highly trained operative. But his sister Claire, I mean, she's just a tough biker chick. Like, you know, she's obviously, she wants to find her brother, but like they're smart enough with the remake to cut it off there. Like, that's what gets her into trouble, just looking for Chris, just looking for his last whereabouts, rather than, I'm going to storm an Umbrella HQ all on my own with dual Uzis. It's like, okay, that's like, what are we doing here? You're not Trinity, you know? You're not John Wick. Anyway, it just felt a little too much in the original game. And of course, there are many other problems I had with the original game. Like I said, there's a tyrant boss fight halfway through that game that is just like such a pain in the ass that I don't know a single person that played Code Veronica for the first time. I've seen many people stream it on their first time, and many people, like myself, get to that tyrant fight on the cargo plane halfway through the game, right before the second half, where you get to Antarctica or whatever. And it, for some reason, that boss fight, always, you never have enough ammo on that first playthrough because the game just screws you over so much with ammunition by the time you get to that boss fight. And he's a big bullet sponge. It takes forever to kill. And I've never run into this problem in any other game of the series because normally that's something Capcom is very good at. Even with the first three games, like ammo conservation and ammo placement and knowing, giving you just the right amount of stuff before a big boss fight, that's always like a really good design quality that the games always have. And The original Code Veronica, man, for some reason, that first half of the game is so good at screwing people over. You just get to this tyrant fight that you don't see coming, and you just have no ammo for it. And there are so many people I know who had to restart the game because you get stun locked so easily in that halfway point. And that's just one example of some of the weird design decisions in that game. There's lots of really boring backtracking as well. There's like a lot of large environments you have to go through, and again, the atmosphere for most of this game to me is just kind of flat. And I feel like the backtracking, even all the backtracking and usual like puzzle solving that you do in most Resident Evil games, doesn't feel as engaging in Code Veronica to me as it is in some other games in the series. Now, I'm not saying the game is devoid of some memorable moments. You got the return of Wesker in this game. You got the Ashford twins, which are kind of kooky and interesting. There's stuff that's neat, but like the execution of it all is just so like it just doesn't feel right to me. It just there's something about the game that just doesn't come off very well. Um, and I think a lot of that is going to be vastly improved in the remake. It can only be improved, you know? We're going to have a much better Steve. We're going to have Wesker's going to be cooler than ever. The Ashford twins will probably be a lot less ridiculous and a lot more creepy and interesting. I think a lot of stuff's just going to be better, you know, and I'm sure the atmosphere will be a lot better. And another reason why I'm excited for it too is because RE2 Remake is still, out of all the modern games in the series, still my favorite game in the series, without question. I think it's the most well balanced. I think it's like one of the most perfectly constructed and most concise Resident Evil games I've ever played. And out of all the remakes we've gotten, like that's still the one I love the most. 3 was kind of disappointing. 4 was just a remake of a game that like could barely be improved upon. So even though I think the RE4 remake is good, even that like left me a little cold because it was like, well, how do you improve on RE4? Like that was already still a great game. I still play the OG and it's still like so good. How do you improve that? Like how do you make that much better? You know? And I do think the RE4 remake, like, sure, it's prettier and like some of the controls are much smoother, but like there's nothing major. You know what I mean? It's not a major leap like RE2 remake was, you know, where it was like this big jump. And now with this ancient Dreamcast game with Code Veronica, a game that I already didn't care that much for, even when it was still fairly new back on PS2, I think it could only be a huge improvement. And that makes me far more excited. So like the fact that it's still that same team that did the RE2 remake, and the RE4 remake, I think this time they've got something that like all the improvements they make are just going to make it a really like hugely improved experience. And I'm very excited for that. Very, very excited. And there's a lot to be excited about with Resident Evil lately because the future is very hype for Resident Evil right now. There's a new movie coming out very, very soon by director Zach Krieger. And that's got me extremely excited because it looks like the first live action Resident Evil production that isn't just a cash grab, you know, or isn't just banking on fan nostalgia or whatever. It's like, oh, here's a new character, here's a whole new scenario, this whole new like side story that's still set in the same universe. I love the idea that this guy, the guy in the movie, he's a medical courier and he's like delivering medical supplies or organs or whatever to different hospitals and stuff. And like the latest trailer name drops Raccoon City. It's like that's where he's going. That's got to be his next delivery. So like that's a really cool plot for a new Resident Evil story. Like I think the haters, the people that are like hating on this from the trailers we've seen so far, I feel like if the trailers we've seen so far, if they were like trailers for Resident Evil 10 or something, if it just said Resident Evil 10 at the end and it was, you know, in-game video game graphics, all this stuff we're seeing, if it was a trailer for a new Resident Evil game, nobody would be complaining. Nobody would say anything because it's just like when RE7 first came out and you had Ethan Winters and it was a new character and it didn't even have any direct connections to past Resident Evil games. I'm like, yeah, it's Resident Evil, bro. It can do new things. It can have new stories. Like, I'm fine with that. It still looks like a new Resident Evil story. It still looks like Resident Evil to me. And it's especially grating. Like I've heard comments from people like where like in the trailer we've got like the zombies hanging from the doorway and stuff in creepy new ways, and people are like, zombies don't do that in Resident Evil, and it's like, how do you know what they do? Dude, what about the first time we saw the Los Plagos zombies in RE4 and they're farming and tending to a farm? What about the werewolves in Resident Evil Village? Like, this series is constantly coming up with new monsters, new types of zombies, all kinds of new shit. Like, let this man cook. Let Zach Krieger come up with new stuff the same way Capcom would come up with new stuff if they were doing a new Resident Evil game. Like, what is the problem? Like, I just feel like those people are such party poopers, such sticks in the mud. Like, let the guy come up with cool new shit. Like, I love that this feels like a new installment of Resident Evil. It just happens to be a movie. That's cool. That's interesting to me, And again, I love the director. I love Zach Krieger. He did Barbarians. He did Weapons. Barbarian was very good. Weapons was phenomenal. That was my favorite movie last year. One of the best horror movies I've seen in a long time. One of the most original, unique horror movies I've seen. And the way he directs his movies, the way he handles like the horror aspects of his movies, the tone he goes for in his movies feels perfect for Resident Evil. And that's why I'm very excited for this particular Resident Evil movie. Because up until now, every other Resident Evil movie we've gotten, at best, even at their best moments, just felt like fan service. They just felt like, this is for the fans. Here's this reference, here's this Easter egg. But they're not necessarily good movies, you know what I mean? Like, I want a Resident Evil movie that even if you've never played a game before in the series, you can get it, you can get into it, and you could watch it just as a great horror movie, And it's clear this will still be set in the universe. It'll still, have plenty of references to the series, but like, it just looks like a great horror movie, period. And that's what I'm excited about. It'll feel good to like say, yeah, this new movie called Resident Evil is really awesome, even if you've never played the games before. Because I feel like there is this obsession with people who are like, no, it's got to be Spencer Manchin, it's got to be Stars, it's got to be Claire or Leon or whoever. And I'm like, but does it? Do we need a retelling of the same stories we already know? Like, no, I want new shit. Give me new shit. I want the movie to stand on its own. So, very excited for that. That's coming very soon. And then to top it all off, we are also getting story DLC for Resident Evil Requiem. And I feel like enough time has passed since the launch of Requiem that I can kind of reflect on that game a little more. I still think it's great. I still think Requiem is probably my second favorite game out of all the modern Resident Evil games after RE2 Remake. I still like that one the best, but I do like 9 better than 7 and Village. I've said that before. 7 and Village have a lot of great moments, but there is something about the pacing of 9 that I really, really love. But I will say I don't think the game is flawless. I do think, looking back on it, that like, once you get to like the RPD and you get to like that long scripted orphanage bullshit, that orphanage section that I don't know why that needed to be in the game. It kind of kills the momentum of the pacing a little bit just for that one sequence. And then the game gets very linear from then on, from the tyrant fight to the plant section to the laboratory. It gets very linear and it kind of runs out of new stuff to show us. And that's the only real gripe I have with Requiem, is I wanted more new stuff. Because the Care Center especially had so much cool new shit with those weird new zombies we were dealing with, and it felt different. That stalker enemy that follows you around, a lot of that just felt kind of fresh, and I think it dips a little too much into nostalgia maybe when you get to the final stretch, but nevertheless, even when Leon gets to Raccoon City and like you're battling your way through there and you're looking for the bomb parts and that big open-ended Raccoon City section, I still liked how open-ended it was. I still liked the gameplay there. There could have been more enemy variety in that section. There could have been more monster variety or whatever. But overall, I really liked Requiem. I did. But I do think this story DLC will be great because here's a chance to here's a chance to give us a little more of what the campaign might have been lacking. I am curious as to whether or not it's going to be more Leon action stuff or Grace stuff, or will they give us more of both? Will it be more of both again? Will Grace even be in it? And if she isn't in it, if she isn't in the DLC, then I guess it would have to be action related all the way through. Because the thing is, it feels like the game is strongly hinting at the possibility that it'll be Chris and Leon that are in this DLC. Just going by like the way the game ends, the way it teases the DLC, you know, Leon's just walking around going, I don't know where Chris is, but I bet he's out there somewhere. And I'm like, oh, it's gonna be, it might be Chris and Leon teaming up, which would still be cool. I mean, I'm down for more action gameplay because Leon is more fun than ever to control in Requiem. And if we get more of that gameplay, like I know they gave us that free DLC, Leon Must Die Forever. And I'm just going to be honest, after spending a little bit of time with that, I didn't like it very much. It's not that good. I love the idea. I love the idea of like, oh, it's a roguelite Resident Evil thing, like an arcade mode. And because I love Mercenaries, I love that. But the problem is there's not enough randomization. It's not random enough. Like you go through it a couple of times and you kind of seen what it can do. And they don't randomize it to the point where you're like running into different enemies in different locations. It's like all the same enemies and all the same usual locations. There's no unique locations added to it. There's no new areas. You're fighting the same bosses. It's all the same stuff, and there's not enough randomization to it. What they basically gave us was like a very cheap randomizer mod. And I've seen randomizer mods, like good ones, on live streams and stuff, and I've seen how creative people can get with those. And Leon Must Die Forever was like a very cheap idea. Like even the dialogue during like the beginning when Leon's running through the city in that mode, like he's reciting the same dialogue as though you were in the story campaign. I'm like, oh, this was very cheap. This was very quick. They did this in like a weekend. And I get it, it's free, but like, it's just not that good. Like, so I'm very excited for the story DLC because I think that even though it'll be paid DLC, you know, you will be paying for it. It'll probably be worth paying for. It'll probably be something good. I'm hoping, because hell, the last DLC they gave us for Resident Evil 4 Remake, the Ada Wong Separate Ways campaign, that was great. That might be my all-time favorite Resident Evil DLC because it was like a separate campaign. You know, slightly shorter than Leon's, sure, but it was still like its own campaign with even its own unique bosses and everything. And I was like, this is freaking cool. She gets her own unique item with the grapple hook and everything. Like that was just really cool. Out of all the things RE4 Remake did, that was actually my favorite new thing that they did that was better than the Separate Ways in the original game. But you know, all that's great. I hope this DLC is of that caliber. I hope it is like almost like a new mini campaign or something. And given that we probably won't get this DLC for a while longer, maybe the end of the year, I'm thinking, maybe October, or who knows. I know they're working on something big. It's going to be something juicy, I'm hoping, you know, with the time it's taking. But yeah, there's so much to look forward to with Resident Evil right now. It's a great time to be a fan. You know, for Requiem, for the Zach Krieger movie that's coming out in mere weeks, Resident Evil Veronica coming out next year. There's a lot to look forward to. The future is looking very hype for Resident Evil, and I couldn't be more excited. So what do you guys think? What are you most excited for out of all these things? What is your most hyped thing for Resident Evil's future? And let me know in the comments below. And until next time, you get to burning and live for the passion.